I didn't understand how clearly my family had ranked me until my mother said it out loud at dinner, not angry or emotional, just calm, almost factual, telling me that my sister's family always came first and that I was always last, while my father nodded as if this were simple arithmetic and my sister smirked into her wine, and I didn't cry or argue. I only said, "Good to know," because in that moment something snapped, not my heart but my loyalty. And my name is Mia, and for most of my life I learned my place without anyone ever explaining it directly, no speeches or rules, just patterns that quietly shaped me. Growing up in a house in Denver that looked perfectly ordinary with its trimmed lawn and family photos by the door, but inside you could feel how attention flowed quickly toward one person and thinned before it ever reached me. Because my sister had a gravity I didn't, conversations bent toward her, plans revolved around her. Crises drew immediate action while my own needs dissolved into the background, and I became the one who didn't need much, the strong one, praised for independence as if it were a gift rather than a warning, because I wasn't unloved, only loved with conditions, reassured with phrases like, "You'll be fine" and "You're so capable," which really meant don't ask for more, don't take up space. And I noticed it in small moments like grocery store cakes for my birthdays while hers were ordered weeks ahead. Family trips where I stayed home to save money, graduations where I held jackets and took photos but never stood in the center, and when I left for community college there were no tears, just a quick hug in the driveway and a reminder to call. And I paid my own way, worked extra shifts, learned how to stretch time and money, and every success quietly reinforced the story they told themselves that I didn't need them. And years later when I moved to Seattle nothing changed. Calls stayed brief, my updates acknowledged then redirected to my sister's struggles, and by the time of that dinner I already knew my rank. What shocked me was how comfortable they were saying it. And after that night nothing changed on the surface, no apologies, no check-ins, just the same assumptions, the same requests phrased casually, watching the kids, covering a bill, fixing a small problem, and for the first time I didn't respond right away, letting my phone sit while I finished my coffee and went to work, discovering that the world didn't collapse when I didn't rush in, and that silence unsettled me enough to start paying attention to how much of my life had been quietly allocated to everyone else, money drifting out in small amounts, time kept flexible, plans never fully committed to. So I began separating things practically, moving money into accounts that were mine, canceling shared access, and when my sister asked for help I replied simply that I couldn't, which triggered immediate confusion. My mother calling to ask if I was okay. My sister reminding me of her stress, and for the first time I understood that knowing someone's struggle didn't make it my responsibility. And that boundary was tested soon enough when my mother called asking me to come home without explaining why. And when I arrived the house felt heavy. The living room table buried under bills and notices, my sister rigid on the couch, my father avoiding my eyes, my mother talking fast about a business decision that hadn't worked, calling it temporary again and again, until they all looked at me and my father said I was in a stable place, without kids, able to handle it, and I asked what the plan was if I didn't, a question that left the room silent because helping had always been assumed, and I asked for time, not to calculate how much to give but whether I would at all, spending that night staring at my childhood ceiling realizing I wouldn't step into this as the family safety net. And after meeting with a therapist and a legal advisor I returned the next weekend with clarity instead of answers, sitting across from them as they repeated the same explanations until I asked how much they needed and then what would change so this wouldn't happen again, a question that landed wrong, my mother saying this wasn't the time to interrogate them, and I replied that it wasn't the time for me to write a check, because this wasn't about helping without limits anymore. And when they told me I could afford it because I was single and stable I told them that was only true because I'd built my life as if no one would ever catch me if I fell. And when my mother said they hadn't known I felt that way I told her they had, they just didn't think it mattered. And I slid a folder onto the table outlining what I was willing to do. A loan with conditions, assets sold first, spending tracked, therapy required, and a written agreement that my name and future would never again be assumed as backup. And my father called it cold, like a bank, and I told him that when they needed emotional support I was family but when they needed money I was infrastructure. And when my sister accused me of punishing them I told her I was stopping the punishment of myself, explaining that if I helped without boundaries I would lose everything I'd built. And when my mother asked if I would walk away if they said no I told her I wasn't walking away from them, I was walking toward myself. And the next day the papers were signed. Not with speeches or Apologies, but with shaky hands and tired faces, and the fallout came quietly as assets were listed, expenses tracked, therapy began awkwardly, and without me absorbing the consequences, everyone else learned to carry their share. And back in Seattle my life felt lighter, I slept better, my phone no longer filled me with dread, calls were about how I was rather than what I could fix, and the biggest change was inside me, realizing that being last in my family was never something to fight against. It was a sign to step out of the line entirely and build a life where my value didn't depend on sacrifice. And for the first time I wasn't waiting to be chosen, because I had already chosen myself.